Isla and I went to a bar, and we sat there for hours. I'm happy she still wants to visit me, even after everything. I'm happy she isn't easily scared off. It took some time, but Isla began opening up to me as I sat across from her, attempting to capture her features in a sketch. She told me about her past, about how she got to the position she's in. She spoke softly. I mean, I had to lean in and ask her to repeat herself a couple times. I won't go into too much detail, as a secret is not mine to tell. But Isla knew a similar fate to my mother. Only she didn't let the sailor destroy her. She allowed herself to be taken advantage of until she had someone to fight for. She told me of the times before she found her will to survive, though, how in little moments of desperation she'd try to fight back, but would be reminded quickly of how much stronger he was. He'd remind her how easy she was to hold down. And Isla accepted it. She said it was the life she chose. She believed she deserved anything that came to her because she chose to be with him in the first place. So she built her own cage from the ground up. I was saddened in the moments she'd argue with herself. You can tell she still battles with the guilt inside, that she blames herself, even when there's none for her to bear. She lifted her hand to me, slowly raising each finger as she reminisced in her head. She got to the count of 5. 5 times that monster almost took her life from the severity of his blows. She mentioned how she will never forget the feeling of hands around her throat. The nightmares that repeat through her head of a massive weight sinking her to the bottom of a river. She lived that way since she was 15. She ran away from one horrible situation right into the hands of another, and she stayed. Tortured herself with her choices, repeating to herself that it was just her burden to bear. That if there was a God, he didn't care for her. That God only cared for the man, and he would always protect him. Until she met the boy. Her torturer took on a young man to work in the boats when Isla was about 25 to 26. She said she could feel the same presence as her deceased child, that he carried the same spirit as the one she lost. Isla stared right through me when she talked about losing a child, like she knew without having me say anything about my own. She continued, stating how she grew protective of this young teenager, like an animal instinct, only then kicking into fruition. She would die before letting anything happen to him again. The monster she was with despised how close she became to the one that she called Little One. He began a new pattern of torture for her. She would beg him to go for her, not for Little One, and then tortured herself over having chosen this life. All this until one day she was awoken to the sound of the boy screaming. Isla knew what it meant, that he was getting the brunt of her lover's anger, and she said it felt like something took over her, like she was no longer human. She rose from her cabin, slowly approaching the crime scene. She said she paused as she tapped on the table. a small smile creeping up her face. She recounted the feeling of jumping on him, how it felt to have her teeth sink into his flesh, how it felt to finally fight back for something worth it. She stated feeling as though she became a mountain lion, prey locked in sight, and she wasn't going to stop until he was only flesh and bone. She had a chunk of his flesh removed from his shoulder before she even realized what was happening. She giggled when remembering the shock in his face when he turned to see it was her doing the damage. She proudly recounted picking up a fisher's knife and slicing into him for every night she spent on the floor, over and over and over. Ever since that night, Isla has run the ship, dedicating her life to tracking down bad men. Not to kill, not necessarily to hurt, really only to satiate her own thirst.